What do you say when an atheist that you're dialoguing with asks, how could a loving God allow suffering and evil to exist?
By allowing free will to exist, by allowing us to choose to do evil, to do wrong, to do our own will instead of his will. But that's the price that came for him with giving us free will. It's the price that comes for us, and the angels for that matter, because they too were given free will, and they too exercised it. The difference being, of course, that angels being angels, their choice lasts forever, whereas with us, we go back and forth from the age of reason until we die. Just if you think about most of the evils that you've encountered in your own life, you'll have to admit that you created them. And as for those that seem to come like bolts from the blue, very often, if not always, there's a message involved with them of some kind, if you can figure out what it is.
But I guess we have to, when it comes to free will, I guess we have to talk about in the collective, because on an individual basis, somebody could be born with an affliction where perhaps free will didn't get them.
It would limit them to a degree, but then we also have to look at the effect that they have on the people around them. So, for instance, you have two autistic kids born to two different families.
Yeah.
The one family, it ruins them, drives them apart. The parents accuse each other, and the whole thing is just an absolute mess. The other, the family pulled together to look after the kid and to give him as good a life as they possibly can. And those are choices.
I know. Well, what I'm trying to say is, what did that autistic kid do to deserve that? See, and that's what I'm saying. I guess we have to talk about in the collective, like Adam and Eve, original sin.
Well, part of it is the fact that he's human. If he weren't autistic, he would be inclined, like the rest of us, to sin. Being autistic, he's not responsible. I guess you might say he gets a better deal than the rest of us in some ways. Certainly, it's like a child who dies before the age of reason and is baptized. That kid goes straight to heaven.
Okay.
So, why does God allow such a thing? Well, see, we're not really able to see with our limited view what it all means anyway. There will be, I have no doubt, in heaven, a ton of these infants running around. Well, except they won't be infants. And they'll be better than they could ever have been had they lived full lives.
Yeah.
But, the alternative, of course, to the atheist is that it's all simply here by chance and nothing means anything anyway.
Yeah, there's a big difference between how an atheist views suffering and how a Catholic views suffering. I think that's another thing, too.
Yeah. Well, with us, it has a point.
It has a point, exactly. That's right.
My mother took 8 months to die. And we had to fight very hard to keep her alive because, of course, the doctors wanted to snuff her. We succeeded. But when she died because her heart gave out. They couldn't revive her.
Yeah.
That's why she died. But she needed those 8 months. The woman who died was a much happier woman than the woman who went into the hospital 8 months prior. A much more reconciled woman. 2 days before she died, she had the third occasion of last rites being given during those months. And it was the only time she was conscious. The first 2 times she was out. But the third time, 2 days before she died, the priest gave her the traditional last rites. She'd had one traditional, one Nova Soda before. And she was conscious and mouthed the responses in Latin. So when she went, she was ready to go. Now, how do you explain to an atheist doctor that kind of departure is worth the 8 months?
Yeah, you can't.
You can't. You can't explain it to them. How do you explain to a doctor that, toward the beginning of her thing, like a month or 2 into it, I had this one doctor yapping at me about, oh, her quality of life is terrible and blah, blah, blah. And I said, really? Really, doctor? Well, let me see. She tells me she's not uncomfortable. She tells me she isn't bored. I don't see how that's possible, but that's what she says. She sees her family every day. She gets sung to every day. That's my mother's quality of life. No discomfort, no worries, entertainment. Now let's look at yours. How often do you work, Doc? 18 hours a day, maybe? 19? You don't really have a life, do you? I'll bet you've lost a girlfriend or a wife because of your work, haven't you? Yeah. I think my mother's quality of life is better than yours. So should we snuff you by your definitions? He had nothing more to say. You know, as it was, she went pretty painlessly and she went pretty quick. It's not always the case, of course, but every case is different. But for the atheist, it's all just pointless suffering anyway.
Yeah.
And really, I don't think the atheist has a convincing answer against suicide the minute the going gets tough.
It's true.
I really don't. But on a purely pragmatic basis, if everybody did that, we wouldn't have a sustainable society.
Yeah, well, I guess it's what the virtuous atheist, maybe they have hope
In what?
that things can get better.
Oh, we mean after they're dead for somebody else?
No, well, you said when the going gets tough,
Yeah.
that maybe it'll get easy again, things will get better. But when someone gets terminal, you know, officially, then there's
Well,
like,
not just that though. It gets better. So what? I mean,
well, this is all there is,
this is all there is.
and people choose something over nothing.
Not always. Not by or we wouldn't have suicides in the first place.
Well, okay. Mm.
Now, the funny thing about that though is that every year a number of people jump off the Golden Gate, and some of them survive, and they all say the same thing, which is that once they made the jump, they suddenly realized that none of the things that they jumped for were really all that big a deal. And that really they didn't have any major problems, except of course having just jumped off the Golden Gate.
Wow.
That being something of a difficulty.
Wow, I didn't know that actually happened. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool that there's that kind of testimony out there.
Now there is. They jump, but they don't all die.